I'm Insomniac, and Spinnaker sent me a watch from China in the middle of the coronavirus epidemic. Hooray!
Oh, yo!
Much better. Okay, now we're ready to review this Spinnaker. I'm Insomniac, and this is the Spinnaker Croft. Alright, so quick disclaimer regarding the beginning of the video. They actually did send this watch directly from China, but I'm sure it's not actually any type of an issue. I just figured, being that it came from China and that everybody's in the middle of this coronavirus madness, that we would have a little bit of fun with the intro. And a little bit of Lysol soap and water definitely can't hurt the watch, so I figured we'd have a little fun with it. So if you wind up watching this review and you really like what you see, don't worry about buying one of these. You're not going to catch coronavirus from a watch. Speaking of watches, regardless of where they come from, if you have any watches that you want to see reviewed on this channel, email me at shouldItimethis@gmail.com. I will let you know where to send the watch or watches. They will be reviewed, insured, and sent back. Okay, well, let's get into the watch. Even though the case on this watch can be considered typical for a dive watch in terms of general shape and design, the overall fit and finish here is really good. It's an intricate mix of brushed and polished stainless finishes. The sides of the case and tops of the lugs are brushed, as well as the outer screw-down portion of the case back, while the underside of the case body, the grip of the bezel, and the edges where the tops of the lugs and sides of the body meet are all polished. That polished lip between the tops of the lugs and the side of the case is nice attention to detail. Speaking of nice attention to detail, the Spinnaker brand name is very nicely engraved into the side of the case, while on the opposite side you have a grippy screw-down crown that's the right size for this case and has the Spinnaker logo on its face. Very nice. The case back isn't necessarily remarkable, but it's a neatly done brushed finish with a raised intersection that has engraved specs about the watch, and the center of the case back is an exhibition case window so you can see the Miyota 8218 automatic movement in action. The rotor has an applied Spinnaker graphic on it, which does jazz up the look of the movement a bit. Lastly, we have the bezel. The insert is brown with a printed minute track done in a raw steel color that matches the brushed finishing well, and in terms of aesthetic, it matches the watch perfectly. It's a coin edge style bezel, which for 99% of the people buying this watch has plenty of grip for rotating the bezel. For the few people who might be trying to dive with it, the grip is decent at best. The mechanism for rotating the bezel has a good positive feel to it, and really no slop or play in between clicks. Overall, especially for the price, I think this is a really nice case. The dial on this watch is awesome. Well, the dial itself is awesome. I'll explain what I mean. The base of this dial is a really textured brown with a slight burst effect to it. The texture is substantial. It almost reminds me of finely ground coffee. Around the very outer edge of the dial, you have a white printed minute track. Then just under that, you have tall, thick applied indices for the hours using rectangles at 12, 3, 6, and 9, while using circles for the rest. All of the hour markers are lume filled with a cool brushed bronze looking border around them. Under the 12 o'clock index, the Spinnaker brand name is pretty thin but applied, while in the 8:30 area you have automatic and the water resistance rating printed on the dial. In the lower right quadrant, you have a running second subdial, which I really like. Has a nicely done concentric circular pattern as the backdrop, then white printing at every 5-second interval with exaggerated markers at 0, 15, 30, and 45. All three hands are broad, chunky style sword-tipped hands, but as much as they're rather chunky, they're the right width and aesthetic for this dial. All three hands are the perfect length for their respective dials, and all three hands have a generous amount of lume filling inside, with the same brushed bronze-style borders as the hour indices. And I almost forgot to mention the date window at 3 o'clock, white numeral on a black disc, which looks to part well enough on a brown dial, and is currently in hiding behind that minute hand. Now earlier I said that the dial itself was awesome. What I mean is that everything I just mentioned I have no complaints about. What spoils this dial slightly is actually the crystal. The sapphire crystal on this watch is beveled at the outer edge for some reason, and what that does is severely distorts the otherwise super clean minute track at the outer edge of the dial. Let me see if I can show it to you better on camera. See, if you look at it from this angle, which is pretty dead on, you don't even really see a minute track. But then if you angle it just a little bit, well, there's minute track. And yep, there's the minute track. So it really depends on the angle that you look at it through the crystal, but it's not always there or easy to find if you look at it dead on. So you really do wind up having to play with the angle in order to tell which minute index the minute hand is pointing to sometimes. It's pretty annoying. Then you have the Cyclops on the crystal for the date window. Not unlike most Cyclops magnifiers, it distorts the date window unless you're looking directly down at it perfectly from above, and it distracts the eye slightly from the otherwise pleasing dial. So basically everything under the crystal is excellent, but the watch would have been better off with a flat sapphire crystal with no Cyclops. The only usable complication on this watch is the date at 3 o'clock. It's cleanly printed and works, pretty hard to screw that up. The only reason it loses 1 point is because of the Cyclops that I mentioned earlier. From most angles the date is distorted or illegible completely, but overall it does the job and works well. All three hands, all of the hour indices, and the 0 marker on the bezel insert are filled with a generous amount of Superluminova lume filling, and it's excellent. It picks up a charge very easily, even from standard room lighting or indirect sunlight, which makes it clearly legible when moving into a dark area from a light area. All of the lume glows evenly and lasts fairly well, so it's very well done, losing in points only to the never-ending tritium tube watches. Time at a glance on this watch is very good. The hands are a great length for this dial. The contrast between the large amounts of lume filling in bronze against the dark brown backdrop makes it very easy to find the hands and hour indices, and the white minute track has great contrasts against the brown as well. The only minor flaws are the crystal's distortion of the minute track, which does make finding it tricky from some angles, and another very minute subtraction comes in where the second subdial is. Even though I like the thick, chunky style hands on this watch, when either of those hands is over the second subdial, it's basically useless. Of course, most people aren't looking at their non-chronographed watch to count seconds, so that's not a big deal, but worth a mention. The strap that comes with this watch is aesthetically perfect for this watch. It's the right width, the rustic brown leather looks awesome with the dial and bezel, and the brushed stainless buckle is a visually interesting shape and has the Spinnaker name well engraved into it. In terms of quality, I haven't owned the watch long enough to tell you how quickly it might wear, but I can tell you one thing, it's thick. It's literally 4 millimeters thick, so it not only feels rugged and high quality, but it's stable enough to offset most of the weight of the case, which equals a very balanced feel on the wrist. The only negative here is that because the strap is so thick, it's very stiff while it's new, to the extent that buckling it and trying to navigate the excess strap through the free loops feels like trying to bend plywood. But this is a very minor negative only because obviously it will become more pliable with regular use in time. It's brand new right now. Overall, it's a very nice strap. Last we have value. The Spinnaker Croft sells on their site for $320, and pretty often they do have sales, so sometimes you can catch it for less than that. But being that as of the time of this review, it is listed at $320 on their site, let's base the value portion on that price. For that price, you do have other brands of automatic dive-style watches with a similar aesthetic to choose from. But where I think this watch shines is in the overall package and attention to detail. As opposed to a lot of watches that I've seen in this price range, where most of the watch is really nice, but inevitably something gets left out as the glaring cost-cutting attribute. Spinnaker really does a nice job here of paying attention to really every part of the watch all the way down to the strap to give you a nice experience. From every angle, it really does look like a quality piece. You saw there on screen how accurate at least this particular one that I have is. It's comfortable on the wrist, it feels rugged and durable. It's not mind-blowing or a piece of watchmaking perfection, that's not what I'm saying, but in the $300 price range, I really can't see anybody buying this watch and being disappointed with it. And keep in mind that even though Spinnaker sent this in, I don't get a penny if you buy one, so there's no agenda behind that statement. That's just literally the way I feel about it. For the money, it's a good purchase. Alright, well, if you have one of these, leave a comment down below. Let everybody know what you think of your Spinnaker Croft or any Spinnaker you have. If you want to leave comments, or if you just want to leave a comment to leave a damn comment, you're welcome to do that as well. If you want to see a lot more reviews on Should I Time This, number one, send in watches, very important. And as mentioned earlier in this review, they don't have to be watches that you're going to donate and let me keep. If you have watches that you want to loan for review, awesome. Again, that email is shouldItimethis@gmail.com. Otherwise, there is a Patreon for Should I Time This. That's the link at the top of the video description down below. Your support there would obviously give me a lot more time to dedicate to this specific channel, which would mean more content, which would mean more awesome watch goodness. So yeah, another big thank you to Spinnaker for sending this in. Nice little piece. And I will see you all at the next review.